there was danger. Why didn't you warn me? Ladies know what to guard against because they read novels that tell them of these tricks.
A new bookish pet peeve enters the algorithm. Yes, that is right. I said algorithm, and I am not incorrect, and you will soon understand why. Under the cast of criticism of women leading books, we see a common complaint that otherwise is not in older books that predate the new booktok algorithm. But we have to wonder, what is it? Long story short, women presenting MCs have become annoying. This is an episode of the Desktop Vanity podcast. Today, we will be talking about how book tropes have become repetitive, how they become redundant, leading to the creation of submissive and unbecoming female main characters, and what this has in common with the performative male epidemic. Now we're having fictional female characters that, just like the performative men in our lives, are also fake feminists, but yet marketed towards women. Yeah, we'll talk about the performative male epidemic, aka fake feminists, and the danger of them encroaching on women-led spaces. We'll also talk about the internalized misogyny that romance authors potentially and absentmindedly might perpetuate when they write their plots and characters. And lastly, most importantly, we will talk about the amazing thing that happens when women authors write selfishly and not for the market. We're also precursor going to get into why this might be happening in the first place, and we're going to use Winston's model of technology to describe how tropes can become redundant in this mass media landscape. Because of course, I love talking about us as women and how to navigate this version of the internet and just this vibe. Let's first get into what a performative man is. So people think that it's always the matcha and the books, and people think that it's the comfy pants and the totes and the headphones and the library card and reading books written by women for women. And it's actually not just that. And in fact, it's really unfair that we're attacking men for just appealing or liking the aesthetic and the laboo-boos. It's actually not about that. It's about being a fake feminist. It's about men understanding that now we are rejecting the classical masculine traits that we no longer find attractive anymore. And now we want soft boys. We want soft boys that get it. We don't like it when a man punches a hole in the wall when he's mad. But from a societal standpoint, I think that plays a really pivotal role in how performative males are becoming a thing. And it's kind of this very sneaky predator tactic where, because they know that we're no longer attracted to these traditional type of men, they now are trying to appeal in a new way. They're remaking over themselves. However, it doesn't come with the beliefs that equate to it. So yes, they might be in female-led spaces. They might appreciate women and women artists. They might appreciate the books. They might get it. They might understand the tricks of the trade. They might understand what we learn about boys in books. Performative men aren't bookish men. They aren't bookish people. And yes, they can read, but they're not necessarily a demographic of a reader community. Since where their reading is so performative, they're not necessarily the same type of average consumer that you would get in a bookish community. And I know if you're still confused, let me give you this performance for you to understand what a performative man actually could look like.
Yeah, I just love reading so much. I just love reading Sarah J. Maas so freaking much. Oh, my bookmark? What do you know? It's my phone number. Here you go. No, really, take it. Take it, please.
It's all just to get into our private zones. It's really just a matter of time. But yes, performative men are fake feminists, and they are also performative readers that don't necessarily basically consume books in the same way as average readers do, especially if a book is obviously meant to be geared towards women. And I don't want to discriminate, like if guys can read what they want, girls can read what they want, but it's also something to be heavily aware of, because now I know that this wider range of audience, in quotation marks, is leading to a new span and a new writing technique that is making people write for the algorithm and not for an audience. Yes, I said that. Algorithm, not audience. Two different things. I will get to that in a moment. Just like how these performative men are adapting to this new audience, this new world, fictional women characters are also becoming performative, because now authors are writing for a new, wider supposed audience. that happens to also be for performative readers. Performative characters for performative readers. The dilemma we face is especially in script writing, especially in TV and film, and is infectious around the PA discussion point with all my friends that are basically PAs, not private investigators, production assistants. Very bougie jobs, I know, very fun. But basically, in film and TV, with script writing and stories, everything is snappy. Everything is to move the plot along. End of story. Period. Fin. That leads to a lot of what I consider narrative shorthands, where we make our concessions of how people are talked about in TV and film, about how women and other characters are depicted in TV and film, because we have to make a lot of narrative shorthands to make time for the plot. So that comes with its concessions. For example, creating a dynamic female character or a woman character in general that, you know, loves herself, is incredibly confident and smart and feminine, and has a lot of self-confidence, that might accidentally, in the process of writing, become a shorthand for a character with vanity, a vain female character. And that also has a lot to do with us just generally not liking women, you know, at the same time. And sometimes even women accidentally don't like women, because we will get into the internalized misogyny that happens with also writers, especially women writers, a little later. Such little time, and also such little time to interpret, they have to take a lot of liberties and shorthands for things like that, which might be kind of sucky. But you're also wondering, Mila, what does this have to do with books? You're talking about TV and film. Well, what if I told you guys, shocker, authors want their books to become movies and TV shows. So why not just shorten the gap and write their stories in a way where they are easily adaptable? This is another core example of how we're seeing books that are writing for the market and writing for the algorithm rather than for an audience or consumers. For some books, they want them to be marketable. Some people want to be the next Colleen Hoover. I have no idea why, but I guess it's valid. It's valid. I'll just say it. It is quite valid. But sometimes people want to make an income off of their art. That is valid. As someone who is a creator and a full-time college student, I would love to have AdSense. I would love to be able to know that I can raise a family someday off of YouTube. And I can do all sorts of things if I had the time and energy. I think it's so valid for authors to want to make a living off of their art, even if that means concessions might have to be made. It is valid. We should be allowed to have an income, because the starving artist is, I think, such an out-of-date reference that does not need to exist in the narrative anymore. Let's go ahead and talk about the internalized misogyny that romance writers accidentally perpetuate, and also the patriarchal rhetoric that we see hidden in things like Hallmark movies and rom-coms. We're going to quickly talk about the hidden body politics and the performance of femininity for courtship, and the performance of female suffering also for courtship as well, and sadly how it can recenter men. Before I get into this discussion, I want to preface that you can decenter men and still want love for yourself. You don't have to choose. Never at all do I think recentering yourself and decentering men means you have to be single. No, you can absolutely still have a boyfriend, you can have a husband, etc. I think that is very okay, and they are two separate things. You can have them both. Disregard any thought process that might make you think that you can't. Into some body politics. We as women in books, especially when we're written by women, sometimes we're accidentally metaphors. Yes, we're always the art that is up to interpretation but never gets the opportunity to interpret themselves. In the sense where basically we're always the cautionary tale, the one that got away, the lady of the wake. We're always said in past tense. Somehow we as women are inherently passive in TV, film, media, and especially in books. How authors are trying to take these empowering women character-based tropes that are starting to become redundant, because once they're starting to be used enough over and over and over again without little change, we're in a positive feedback loop where they can only be so different so much, leading to them becoming redundant and then becoming annoying. It's just like how we overbred pugs so much and now they breathe and sneeze backwards. Ugh. And it's also like when a snake eats its own tail and the snake can't tell. That's what makes it even more frustrating. So that's how we started getting more submissive and unbecoming women MCs that are seemingly pandering towards a patriarchal agenda that benefits men that will probably don't deserve those women in their lives, low key. Think about the beginning of 50 Shades of Grey, where he gifts her those books, and one of the quotes that he writes down, what I said in the beginning, because that's the important part that we need to know about performative men in bookish places. When they're performative readers, they might read a little bit, and they might learn the tricks that we use to keep us safe. They'll learn how we think, how we talk, and they'll learn a little bit more about what we supposedly want in someone. And that is dangerous. It's a tool for them. And it's also a really good way to interpret 50 Shades of Grey, where he's basically telling you what his role in the story could be. And it's basically showing how women, especially submissive women characters in general, it's just pandering to the male gaze, and it's pandering to a patriarchal rhetoric. So when we see women that also perform our own feminine suffering, where we need help with everything, we need someone to open the jar to reach everything, we need to be saved, it feels good for us because we want to be saved sometimes. Sometimes we want to be taken care of. Sometimes we don't want to worry. Sometimes we don't have to worry. But it's also a way of recentering men in a way that could potentially be healthy, because men want to be wanted, women want to be taken care of, but this is a disconnect that I see in society where I don't think men nowadays, especially Gen Z men, they don't want to take care of anyone. They don't give two craps. And I feel like we're all still children in some capacity. This very painful patriarchal rhetoric, especially in rom-coms, in my opinion, where we see she's always sacrificing this lavish, chic, gorgeous life to be with a poor man-child that doesn't want her to grow as a person. Talking about The Devil Wears Prada, one of my favorites of all time. But really, it's just frustrating, honestly, simply because we're seeing this happen a lot more, especially in Hallmark movies, especially as the holidays come closer, where it seems to be a ending streak. We're seeing a streak where there's a narrative shorthand for love over money, but it's more complex than that. Yeah, she's giving away her beautiful six-figure life in the city when she's now getting married to Santa Claus's grandson, who owns a Christmas tree farm that's only open twice a year. And we have to wonder, yes, there must be a benefit to that, but it is creating a narrative shorthand, like I've previously discussed, where it's now making us who lack the time and energy to interpret, because the economy, we are now suddenly being trained to think that we should choose that over the centering of ourselves and having a life of self-growth, development, and chicness and gorgeousness. And even in shows like The Materialist, we're seeing this in Finite, where we're seeing the narrative being placed where she could have chosen financial stability and abundance, but at what cost? But yet, even after the credits roll, when she ends up with Chris Evans, sorry, spoiler. When she ends up with Chris Evans at the end of the credits, what we don't see is probably the same cycle that will continue of money issues and the complexities that come with that. And that is something that we should inherently discuss more often. But we do see this very painful patriarchal rhetoric seen a lot in Hallmark movies. And I feel like it's a way of men who are in control of these creative executive narratives in the industry exuding a narrative rhetoric that is beneficial to them because it gets women to lower their standards and settle because that's supposedly normal. Yes, things can become easily redundant very quickly because we are now creating performative characters for a performative reader. And we are now accidentally ingesting and internalizing a patriarchal rhetoric that could recenter the wrong men in our lives. And it comes from the stemming fact that we as women, we want to be taken care of. We want to be taken care of emotionally, physically. We don't have to want to worry because we, since the dawn of time, have been taking care of everyone and everything, and it has not been recognized. We have had this intense unpaid labor, and I do not want to argue about that because for the sake of this narrative essay, I want you to understand that as a key aspect. I don't want to argue about that in the comments, not at this time. If you feel like you want to argue about unpaid labor, maybe this channel just isn't for you. But yeah, that's what leads to the potentially either submissive or brutish women MCs that we are seeing in fantasy and in fiction as a whole. But how do we fix something like this? How do we revert back? How do we stop accidentally writing and creating artwork for algorithms and not for people? And how can we search for the right audience? And my philosophy is write selfishly. It is so simple as that. We should write selfishly. Artists should create selfishly, because when we as women, since we are inherently bred and raised and trained to take care of everybody, taking care of everybody is like taking care of ourselves. So therefore, when we take the initiative to do something selfishly, that's when women entrepreneurs come up with technology to make motherhood easier. That's when women write amazing female characters with swords and shields that are badasses, but they still love the finer things and they still love wearing dresses, and they don't reject these femininity traits that women still enjoy while still being empowered. Femininity should not equate to weakness, and we should stop trying to adopt the fact that we're having performative women characters that are just trying to act more like brutish men. That days are gone. And it just warms my heart. Write selfishly. Write selfishly. Because when we do that, we end up writing actual real women characters. We write characters that look like us, looks like our mom, our grandma, our friend. We write really good characters that everybody will love. And I can think of all these different examples right here. Apparently, writing selfishly is what will fix that. Because I know what you're thinking, oh, but what if my book doesn't sell? Well, here's the thing. Your book is going to be so much more different that it won't have competition. And sometimes it's the very unique books that get the book deal, even if you don't have a following online. Trust yourself. Write selfishly. And be that bitch and girl. Be a bestie. Be a friend. If you want to talk more about the beauty industry or feminist media studies, do not just follow Mila's Best Life Lately, but also follow my Substack, the Desktop Vanity, where you can find articles like this. Very purred, I know. A little TLDR for the people that got lost or were doing laundry as they were listening along to this. We talked about how performative men are performative readers, creating a performative reader audience, which inherently is affecting the TikTok booktok algorithm. Authors want to make money, so they write for the algorithm and they write for their books to be adapted to the screen, which leads to narrative shorthands that happen in screenwriting, which lead to not as dynamic characters, and also lead to performative women characters that are performed for performative readers that don't really read and are not the actual audience for that book. We talk about the internalized misogyny that sometimes women writers accidentally perpetuate in their books, and we talk about the secret patriarchal rhetoric of rom-coms that we must be aware about as well when navigating the media that we consume. We also talk about things like Winston's model of technology and how it's used to show how certain fictional tropes can become redundant after being overused, and how they are no longer as enjoyable as they used to be. We also talked about, lastly, how to avoid it by writing selfishly. Because when we do that, when women do anything selfishly, we inherently make the world the better place. We make better art. We make art that matters more because it matters to us more. Because the algorithm is not the same as your audience. The algorithm can take you to the wrong audience. Your audience are the people that are waiting for you tomorrow. I want to let you know I love you too. Check out the Substack. And I just want to let you know I love you too. Check out the Substack. Go take a nap. It's late.